What a flashback to the 90s, right? Ooh. So, if you haven't gotten into 90s nostalgia yet, I've got you covered because today we're going to make fonts like it's 1995. But before, the idea for the topic of this talk was sparked 2 years ago in Zurich when I watched a talk by Sophie. In her talk, Sophie did not only showcase her lively and inspiring archive of 90s websites designs, but she was also rebuilding them in CSS. But obviously with today's standards, like with accessibility features and such. And at a certain point in her presentation, she started building word art in CSS. And I was like, oh yeah, you give me ideas. And here I am on stage going to rebuild art with you, word art, but this time not in CSS, because I am not a CSS expert, but we're going to rebuild word art in font editors. Yeah, so thank you again, Sophie, for allowing me to steal this idea. But first, you might wonder, Ulrike, why should we revive this typography madness that seemed to have no rules and no limits of creative freedom? Well, I see it a little bit as this ice cream here. You can hold it in your hand. It will probably bring you in a good summer mood. It's cold, so it will refresh you on a hot, sunny day. So this ice cream is doing a pretty good job, right? But why should we settle with this ice cream when we can have a gelato like this one here with a lot of delicious decorations and beautiful extras? I think this ice cream will refresh us even more and bring us in an even better summer mood, right? So let's start building some delicious ice cream or decorative fonts. So I built this opening slide actually in Microsoft Word. So we have some fancy text decorations here because yes, it's 2025, but we can still use some word art in Microsoft Word. But there's not the good stuff anymore. And no Clippy. So, if we can't use word art anymore, I mean the Microsoft Word in order to create word art, and I mean the proper word art, like back in the days, then we have to rebuild it ourselves. And I think a good idea is to first have a closer look at what it takes. What are the secret ingredients of word art? So, first we have shadows. So, for example, cast shadows. We have all kinds of 3D effects. Then we have gradients. Think about rainbows. And very important, distortion. And not only distortion, but we also have a baseline that is actually not based, but very curvy and wavy, and then distortion. And another rule, it seems, is to never only use only one of these effects, but to always use multiple effects combined. So in order that we have multiple layers of effects. So what we can do now is that we create a font that has multiple decorative styles. So instead of having light, regular, bold in the font menu, we just have different effect styles. And then we can create these 3 different text frames with a different style. And in our favorite design application, we just add a different color to all of these text frames. And then we align these 3 text frames on top of each other in order to have a multicolored text. It looks nice, I know, but it's actually only nice to look at, because when you imagine you spot a typo in your text, then what you have to do now is you have to extract all the layers again. You have to go in all the different text frames in order to correct the text and then align them again on top of each other. So this is a bit tedious, right? So wouldn't it be cool to have all these different decorations, all the different colors already merged in one single font file, so that you type and you instantly get this result without coloring and merging and stuff? This would be absolutely cool, right? And this is actually possible thanks to color fonts. So color fonts allow you to include all kinds of different color layers in a single font file, so that you type and you have all your decorations, colors combined at once. So, and with that new knowledge about color fonts, let's start using them and let's start actually building something. So we have our menu here. Let's choose something nice to rebuild. I really like this wavy baseline here. So let's start by adding a color layer and create a light blue letter. Now we need another color layer behind it that is dark blue. And actually there's also this outline around the letter, so we add that as well. Okay, this was the easy part. Now comes the tricky part, the wavy baseline. And I think the easiest way to mimic this effect is by distorting our letters. So let's add another version of this letter that is slanted upwards. And then we move this a little bit down in order so it sits on this imaginary wave line. And then we add yet another version of our letter that is slanted downwards. So now we have already a kind of a wave. And in order to make this wave complete, we actually have to chain now all these versions. So there's 3 different versions in a row. And we can chain these 3 different versions with an OpenType feature. So OpenType features are actually tiny code snippets that you can include in a font. And with these code snippets, you can give directions, for example, for character replacement. So we can define in this OpenType feature to always chain these 3 different versions, always in the same order. So we can get a little bit seasick here already, right? And we already smell the sea breeze, right? So this looks almost already like the original. But I was wondering if we can add a little bit more fun here, a little more entertainment. I mean, it's a wave, it should move like a wave, right? So I thought maybe let's add another OpenType feature in addition to this one. And this one would always, as soon as you type a letter, the first letter would change to one of these other versions in our font, and then this other OpenType feature will always try to maintain this wave animation so that you have now this wavy feeling. And since it's so much fun, I would like to replay this feature here in the audience with you. So let's really feel this OpenType feature and do an audience wave here. I hope you're with me. So we start on this side and we go like, woo, and then all the way, yes. Very, very nice. So I think it's really important to internalize with our body this OpenType feature in order to feel the hard work that this OpenType feature is doing again. So thank you for participating. So this OpenType feature happens while typing, so it gives the user a really nice entertainment while they work on their PowerPoint presentation. So this font is not only fun to look at, but it's also fun to use. So I think it's really following the spirit of WordArt. And I think Microsoft would approve for this OpenType feature. And yes, the 90s are back, in case you wondered. Okay, let's do another one. Let's pick this one. Also here, we start simple. We dip our letters in purple pink. We add another color layer with a different color with this extrusion. Also here, we slant the letter, so it's going up. And also here, again, we need multiple versions for each letter. And of course, not just for the H, but for the whole character set. And then, again, we program this OpenType feature in a way that it would chain these versions in order to ramp on this baseline. But actually talking about OpenType features is already one step ahead, because we have to quickly go back and look at the style of the letters, because if you look at the original, there is something missing. A gradient, right? And gradients are so super important for word art. But then how can we include a gradient in a color font? Because I explained before that we have these color layers, so in each layer is a different color. But then a gradient? I mean, we cannot just add like billions of layers in order to simulate a gradient, right? Well, thankfully to one of the newest color font formats, which is CLR version 1, which is actually version 2 because I started counting with 0, but it's CLR V1. And this one actually now also supports transparency and gradients. Yes, beautiful, right? And I mean, we could use gradients already before in fonts, but for that we needed to embed PNG images. So when you think about emojis, for example, and they have these blushing cheeks, this is also a gradient. But these used to be PNG images, and now with this color font format, this can be vectors, which is of course a huge improvement regarding the file size. So yes, CLR V1, and we can have gradients as vectors. Beautiful. So this color font technology is still quite new. I mean, quite compared to other font technologies at least. But the support is actually pretty good already. So we can use color fonts in web browsers, Adobe products, Affinity supports color fonts. And Microsoft Word supports vector color fonts. So, since we're here now in Microsoft Word, do you think what I think? Apparently not. Should we apply some word art effects to our word art style font? Okay, now you're here. So let's open the effects panel and add some crazy effects. So how about a shadow? So now we have this beautiful inwards pointing shadow. And a glow. Wait for the next part. Wait for the next effect, because this is my favorite. A mirror effect. Yeah, I mean, I was now skipping through the slides here super quickly, but in reality, I was spending hours like adjusting all these sliders, and I was like, oh my god, all these possibilities. And what happens if a little bit here, maybe full in here? And I was like, all these possibilities. It was like really, really into adjusting all these things with the sliders. And I think this is what made word art back then also so successful, right? You had control over your designs, and especially for non-designers, they could be creative. And I mean, you have all these different sliders here and can make all the kinds of different adjustments. And then you have such a great variety of all kinds of different outcomes. And I was wondering, can we bring some of the spirit also to fonts? So that maybe also with a slider so that we can make adjustments to a font. But then a slider in a font. Has anyone any idea how to bring a slider to a font? Very profound. Just for me to know, how familiar is everyone with variable fonts? Who knows what a variable font is? That's just like 10 people or something. Okay, no worries for the rest. You're like only 9 years behind. No, that's fine. Not kidding. Not judging. Yeah, oopsie. Okay, variable fonts. I give you just a very basic, rough introduction into variable fonts. So this is not a variable font. This is just a static font, a normal font. And here in this font, you see in the menu all the different weights that you can pick. In a variable font, though, you have access to the interpolation axis. So you can seamlessly adjust the weight between light and bold. So the variable font really gives you access to all possible positions on this interpolation axis and not just the few predefined styles. Besides that, a variable font is just one font file that holds all the possible weights. So that's why variable fonts are so intriguing for the web, so performance-wise. So this variable font has a weight axis, but as a type designer, I'm not restricted to the weight axis, but actually I can also come up with my own custom axis. So that's what I call creative freedom, right? So let's see how we can use variable fonts to satisfy some 90s nostalgia. So first I created a normal color font. Well, it's not so normal because it has a rainbow gradient. But since we know that one of the secret formula of WordArt is to never only use one effect, in addition to our rainbow, we need to add something more here. I really like this extrusion effect. So let's add a WordArt slider that allows us to be creative. So here we're not interpolating between light and bold, but between no extrusion to full extrusion, and the slider allows us to get every possible length for this effect. So whatever fits best to our design. So, is this enough? Is this WordArt already? No, right? Yeah, so let's add another slider and let's be even more creative. And of course, we can now combine these two sliders and all possible in-between steps. You can have all possible combinations of these two interpolation axes. So we can really be creative here. And in case you wondered, yes, this is actually a font, so you can type it. It's not a simulation, which is pretty cool. But also here, in order to make that work, we need a lot of alternatives. And I mean, we have two interpolation axes with 4 extremes, then all these alternatives, and that's for each character, not just the age. So this is quite a lot of work, usually. But the good thing about WordArt is you can just stretch and distort the letters. There's no hourly long fine-tuning and optical adjustments, and in order to find the perfect letter shape, just squeeze them a bit, add some slint, and you're done. So it's not so much work in the end. So yes, color fonts allow us to be creative, and we can use, welcome back Clippy, we can use gradients, transparency, combine them with patterns and random geometric shapes, so we can have all the delicious decorations and beautiful extras, and really can pay tribute to the 90s. But there's more. So let's start building something more. What else happened in the 90s that we can rebuild? So do you remember foam parties? Maybe we even have some foam at tonight's party, I don't know. So in order to get in the mood already for the maybe foam party tonight, let's create a foam party font. And of course, this foam party font needs a bubble slider. So this foam party font is a variable font with a bubble axis. But now moving the bubbles manually with the slider is not a lot of fun, right? So it's just too much work having someone sitting there all night in order to get the foam party going. So, but the really, really cool thing about variable fonts is that you can actually animate the interpolation axis in CSS. So you can animate the slider using CSS. And so you can have this really nice animation and movements on your website sorry, with a simple CSS transition or a keyframe animation between one slider position and the other slider position. And yes, this is a font. You might wonder, why should I use a font for that? Of course, you can also easily build an SVG animation with this animation. But then, as you probably, or everyone knows, it's always better to include text on a website as a font, because like this, it can be easily read by screen readers and search engines. Now, I want to talk to you about rainbows. So this is a color font I made for Adobe. It was taken from beautiful wood type we found in the Tipoteca Italiana. It's a beautiful printing museum in the north of Italy. And at the beginning, I had really, really big problems getting this rainbow to work, because my rainbow has 8 colors. But this is not a monospaced font, so all the letters have a different amount of stripes in the back. So the I has 4, then the W had 14. So this was just a random order of color, but not at all a rainbow. So in order to get the rainbow right, also here, I had to add multiple versions for each letter, 8 to be precise. And then all the letters have the same order, the same sequence of colors, but every version has a different starting color. And then I wrote an OpenType feature that would detect on which color the previous letter ends, and then automatically picks the version that has the correct color encoding. And with that, no matter what we type, we will always get the perfect super rain. Wow. And the cool thing about this OpenType feature, or in general about this color font, is that it also works over multiple lines, because the stripes connect seamlessly. Now, when you hear me talking about all these alternatives, you might remember the first font we made with the wave animation, right? Also there we had multiple versions. So maybe we can recycle this OpenType feature that was adding movement while we type, but maybe not in order to get a wave animation, but maybe in order to animate the colors. So we can maybe turn this rainbow font into a 90s party font. And this also only happens while typing. So this is me sitting in the background doing space, backspace, space. And I was wondering, can't we just automate this animation somehow in order to not have someone sitting at the party as a DJ always doing space, backspace? But then how can we do that here? I mean, before we animated the slider in the foam party font, but here we don't have a slider, because this is not a variable font, it's a static font. So maybe we have to have a look again at colors in a color font, because there's something I haven't mentioned yet, because it's actually a bit of a downer. So as a user of a color font, you cannot just change the color as you're used to in design application, because the color information is already in the font. Sorry. But you web people, you are so privileged. You have a huge advantage over graphic designers who work in graphic design applications like Adobe or Affinity, but because you can actually access the color table of color fonts in CSS. So you can customize the colors of a color font to your company's corporate design, for example. And you can either just manipulate one of the colors of the existing base color palette, or you just rewrite all the colors with the override descriptor and create your own custom color palette. So now we at least managed to change the colors. So now we just have to animate them. So when we think back now again at this foam party font with a slider, I mean, we still don't have a slider here, but we were animating this, the slider from one slider position. We added a keyframe animation to the other slider position. So maybe here we can animate from one color palette to the custom color palette we just created and add a keyframe animation between these two color palettes. Could that work? Yes. So we can animate colors in a color font, which is fun, right? But can it get even more fun? Of course. Maybe if we add some more color palettes, maybe 8, and then we animate also between all these different color palettes, maybe? And this happens completely automatic. So no more space, backspace. This happens completely automatic without any further doing in your browser. So no more backspace, backspace. And yes, this is a font. We can read it, but a machine can read it too. And with the prefers reduced motion media query, this can be easily replaced also by a fallback font or the static monochrome version of the font. So it's a very inclusive party font. So now imagine we want to combine color fonts, animation of the colors in the color font, but then we also want this slider animation. So we want to animate a variable font, so everything all at once. Could that work, maybe? No? So let's add some flashy, blinking disco lights to our foam party font. And with that, I'm actually already at the end of my presentation, but I hope that now, after seeing this, you are also really longing to get a nice gelato. Thank you so much.